good evening and welcome to this week's edition of the Scots in Us podcast. We're going to turn our attention to the museums of Scotland and to the capital improvement projects that have been underway throughout the country in the recent years, leading this year to such wonderful openings as the Burrell Collection in Glasgow and also the Treasures Gallery at the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh. And underway, Paisley Museum, which is going to see a regeneration that is going to help the whole of this town of Paisley, the largest town in Scotland. But let us begin by joining Dora Petherbridge, who's going to take us on a journey to the treasure galleries of the National Library of Scotland, which recently reopened.
But today, I'm really looking forward to speaking to you about the Treasures Gallery. So could we begin by you introducing us to the gallery and what the visitors will be seeing when they enter the library now?
Yes, Camilla, thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be able to talk to you all about this new project for the library, long awaited by us, the staff at the library, but also, I hope, by our visitors, because, of course, we were due to open it pre-pandemic and we've all been kind of waiting to be able to launch it, and now it's open, a new space that is devoted entirely to displaying some of the library's many treasures. So we have 30 million items roughly at the National Library, so very, very big collections, which grow every week by about 6,000 or so print items, and then all of the digital collections, which are vaster than that. So from that kind of crazy wealth of material, we had to select our kind of 12 to 13 treasures we allowed ourselves. So a really difficult choice given how spoiled for choice we were. We wanted to represent all aspects of the library's collection. So that's even the moving image archive, the very early sound items we have at the library, our oldest manuscripts, right up to our most recent digital publications. So what you will see when you come to the gallery is material ranging from the 12th century to the 21st century.
So you're using the Treasures Gallery to give people a sense of the wealth that you have there, because I was not realizing that you had the moving pictures area and that side of things. So you are not a classic library of musky books.
No,
wealth of other things.
Yeah, a huge variety and diversity of format, including the moving image material, which is very special to Scotland and very fragile and very rare, as you can imagine. And we can come back to that maybe to talk about which moving image archive item you've chosen, because it is one of my favorites. So we have tried to express through this gallery the wealth of the collections, and also express, I suppose, the wealth of Scotland's cultural identity and its very rich history, obviously, as you explore. But it was a really tricky, to do that. You had to be so strict, and really, we had some tense discussions about what was going in, and everybody had to state their case for which treasure was going to make, the first opening exhibit. So what we did to help ourselves with this is have a kind of light thematic approach where we thought about Scotland's history, its current identity and culture, as kind of represented by themes. So innovation, for example, travel, let me think, literature and the arts was quite a big theme. The Gaelic language we looked at, book arts, obviously that's our speciality, but Scotland's particular relationship to fine books and the art of bookmaking. Moving image music also needed to feature in the gallery. It's very important to Scottish identity. So we layered our idea of what makes a treasure with this thematic approach, which will help visitors navigate the gallery as well and maybe pick out what's of interest to them.
So you have a wonderful, fresh modern approach, which I think is where the modern bit comes into the description of your work. But you're working with all these other curators and different heads of department to find that one piece that's going to pop and make and speak to you and to everybody else.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Exactly, Camilla. Yeah, we had to kind of mix our perspectives with the modern, with the more kind of purely historical. But what we found in doing that and in having those kind of discussions and putting things next to each other in the gallery is unexpected resonances between our selection came up, you know, when you have a very old medieval manuscript and you put it next to a letter from Beethoven or the Charles Darwin item we've got, what does that do to these kind of different conversations and topics that we've represented? So it's quite kind of an interesting side effect to have such a broad span of items on display.
Right. And so if you could give us a taste, a feel for for some of the highlights of this, and are these your favorites, or have some of them been put to the side and you've got to wait to weasel them in?
Maybe a bit of both.
A bit of both.
And I try not to be too biased. I mean, the material that I worked on in this gallery represents our very modern political collections. For example, we wanted to represent Scotland's political identity as it now is. So we did a display on our kind of most treasured items connected to devolution and to the devolution referendum, and what a significant moment that was. But in fact, while that's a very, very strong, treasured kind of moment in the gallery, one of my favorites is something that I haven't got any curatorial responsibility for. It's a very early illuminated manuscript, the Iona Psalter. And it's the first thing that you see when you walk into the gallery. So my unbiased view is that that is truly one of the highlights. It's one of the earliest manuscripts in the National Library's collection that relates to a woman. We don't have all of the facts. I mean, they were kind of lost in the mists of time, but we do know from the way that the Latin prayers are written in this manuscript that the female form is used. So from that, it's very likely that this was for a woman's own private devotion. And to have something from the 12th century, it dates from around 1180, that represents a woman's private life, her private religious identity, is just extraordinary. And not only that, but it's beautiful and so extraordinarily crafted and so extraordinarily rare. And that's the first thing you see when you walk in the gallery. So that really sets the bar very high, I think.
And so the books that you have run from the 12th, from very early.
Very, yeah. And
then so we start with this wonderful illuminated manuscript. Where do we go next?
Well, interestingly, we didn't choose a chronological approach. That would have been too ordinary. We wanted to have a more organic kind of evolution in the gallery. So where you can go next, depending on your inclination as a visitor, is to look at a Gaelic manuscript, which is another extraordinarily rare item in the library's collection that could have so easily been lost. It's a medical manuscript, so it has compiled the medical knowledge passed down through generations of Gaelic-speaking families. And in this wonderful book that it looks like a prop from Lord of the Rings or something. It really does look like somebody has designed it to be as old and evocative as possible, but it's genuinely like that. Somebody described it to me, one of the curators who looks after it, as a kind of manifestation of the NHS website, or a kind of Google your own symptoms from the 17th century. So it's kind of got that kind of everyday family reference. So it's all of the folk knowledge about medicine that's preserved in that wonderful Gaelic manuscript. So that's where you can go next. Or you could turn and you could see 30 translations of Harry Potter, of the first Harry Potter novel, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which, as you know, has a very strong connection to Edinburgh, being written here. And what we've done there is pull these, very modern books, quite ordinary in that we've all seen a copy, we've all held a copy in our hands, probably given one to children that we know. But when you see them together, these 30 different languages, you really begin to visualize the impact that Harry Potter had on children's literature and maybe perhaps on publishing generally. And you see all these different covers and different representations of these famous characters before it was standardized. So we've captured through the library's collections the early days of Harry Potter, and you can see the Ukrainian edition, you can see the Hawaiian edition of Harry Potter, editions in all the languages of India. The French edition is fascinating. Their depiction of Harry and the other characters is really peculiar. That we hope visitors will kind of have a very strong personal connection to.
So in the same mode, you talk about the jackets on the books and how they express so much and all the rest. Have you done the same thing with some of the album covers of music? Because they're so big. Wow.
You've just expressed exactly what we want to do. We haven't done that in the gallery yet, but what we would love to do is use that Harry Potter model again for other works of art or literature or music and look at the kind of diversity of representation, because it's what our collections allow researchers to do for themselves. You can pull all of the kind of manifestations of a work of art and look at its kind of variety. So we would like to do that. We haven't yet done it with anything else. We have got the really beautiful display of fine bindings. So what we call the wheel and herringbone bindings, which are particular to Scotland's bookmaking history. And we have several of those together in one case. So you have that kind of cumulative impression.
What does that mean? What does that mean when you say the binding is just to Scotland?
Well, it was, I mean, perhaps I've slightly misworded that. It was a speciality of bookmakers in Scotland, and they used a particular design that became like their own stamp or kind of aesthetic identity, and the designs that one of them is called the herringbone design, and the other is the wheel. So using a kind of circular motif, and of course all in gilt against beautifully coloured leathers. Very deep crimson against the gold is always a winner. And these beautiful covers, you can see a selection of them in the Treasures Gallery that gives you that impression of the talent that Scotland was producing all together. And I think it would be rare for the library to be able to show visitors that kind of cumulative effect of items other than in this gallery, which is why it's such a good opportunity for us to get our material out.
But where you are sitting at this moment, speaking to us,
yes,
has the most wonderful collection of books, gorgeous bindings.
Yes, and these are, I suppose they're spares, really. So these are the ones in one of our meeting rooms where I'm sat now. We have all of our other similar bindings, duplicate copies these are. So all of our other ones are in dark stacks where no natural light can fall on them.
Right.
And I think that's also reflected in the Treasures Gallery, is that we've had to care for these items in a very particular way, and the lighting level's quite low, quite dramatic. Many of the treasures are really fragile and they can't be exposed to the light, like the Gaelic Manuscript or the Iona Psalter. Their lifespan is quite short, so that we can even display them takes a huge amount of care and effort and measuring of exact light levels to make sure that these items are preserved forever. So these ones look very attractive, but we have other copies that will never see daylight. No UV rays will ever get anywhere near them.
Now, so the gallery is set now for the next few months.
Yes.
It's just opened, and this is going to be, and it's also is a window into what one can experience when one goes around the rest of the library.
That's right.
So what has Lucy, who runs and oversees so much of the library, got up her sleeve next? What exhibits have we got coming up?
Well, one thing I should say is what we're really interested in is what other people, not the curators and other staff who work here, what other people would consider the library's treasures to be. So what haven't we shown yet? What would people like to see? We've had a number of discussions about how rare shopping catalogues are, for example. Now we've got the Gutenberg Bible in the Treasures Gallery at the moment, one of the most famous, rare, early books showing how type was produced. And that's one of 20 copies in the world that we know about. So we have our Gutenberg Bible. However, that's not everybody's treasure. And we are wondering what people may consider their own personal treasures to be, what's in everybody's attics that is the most loved childhood book, or a magazine that formed a kind of particular adolescent view of the world, or a shopping catalogue. We've recently purchased some very rare 1980s and 1990s shopping catalogues, and it's like a portal into into that time. So we're considering everything, a whole range of material, from the everyday to the very, very expensive. What we do want to show is more of our international items. So in the coming years, you'll be able to come in and see some South Asian manuscripts, a really wonderful scroll of kind of a personal astrology. So where we have had the Iona Psalter, which is a personal devotional manuscript, we'll then change that to take us to another part of the world, but reflecting a similar personal relationship with spirituality through this South Asian manuscript. So that's one example. Well, I'm trying to think what else I can reveal at this point.
I think that one thing that you and I talked about that we should mention too,
yes,
one is that it's the 300th anniversary of Flora MacDonald.
Yes.
Wonderful stories about Bonnie Prince, not stories, the history of Bonnie Prince Charlie and all that they did together. And you do have some wonderful Jacobite papers.
We do.
So there is that side of things within the Treasures Gallery too, that you are capturing.
Yeah, we have one of our kind of themed cases is called Shaping the Nation. And through this case, we want to look at the history of Scotland, the really important historical moments and events. And so, of course, for the very first iteration, or the first kind of example of items we put into the Shaping of the Nation case, we chose Flora MacDonald related material and the Lion in Mourning. So the Jacobite rebellion is represented, and that was really important for us to have that in as the opening display. It's not my speciality, but the items that we have chosen are really wonderful. There's a map of the battlefield at Culloden that you can see, obviously all hand drawn, remarkably well preserved. There's the Lion in Mourning itself, which is a book containing relics, fragments of material. I mean, it's kind of quite hard to describe because it's so extraordinary, but into the front board of this little rare book is pasted part of the apron string, which was worn as a kind of female disguise.
When she was escaping.
Yes, that's right.
He was put in that, wasn't he?
Yeah, so Forbes got that from Flora MacDonald, who brought it to Edinburgh, and that's been preserved in the front of the book, along with a little bit of the waistcoat as well. So that's it's just extraordinarily rare and personal representation of that bit of history.
So we will return to you on that subject
Yes.
in the coming months.
And
but also, this is the 250th anniversary of Scott. And
oh, yes, he's coming up as well. I should have mentioned that. Thank you. Yes,
and
that will be something to
so,
look out for.
Yes, but you meant, and he loved, from talking to Abbotsford, I was hearing how he loved like the periodicals and the small little booklets and everything. But you have something coming up about pen pals.
Ah, yes. So
it made me think of him, because it's all about that love of writing and writing notes and writing the newsy gossip.
Yes.
Gossip, didn't he?
Yeah, so what we will, anybody coming in the summer will really, you could spend days at the library, but you'll be able to see not only the Treasures Gallery exhibition, but our new exhibition opening in July, which is this pen names exhibition. So looking at writing and literary figures, literary identity, you know, authorship, different ideas of authorship, how writers preserve their identity or reveal it, the kind of gossipy side of that, as you say. So that will be opening soon, and there's a real, that's a real treat. I think that will be really exciting.
And I would be amiss if I didn't ask if you know when the Honorsfeld papers will be arriving with you.
Soon. I actually don't know. I don't know whether Lucy might be able to shed some light on that, but we will be in time representing that wonderful collection within the Treasures Gallery, and that's where Walter Scott comes in. So watch this space. I won't say too much more than that, but it will be soon. So definitely come back to us and we'll give you more details on what you can see.
We're just so, I've just been so excited to see how everybody came together and put that and made that happen.
Yes.
It really was such a great initiative.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us today and giving us a window into the Treasures Gallery. And we look forward to learning more. And I hope to see you when I'm over in Scotland in a few weeks' time as well.
That would be wonderful, Camilla. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about the treasures.
Thank you.
I can't wait to go to Edinburgh and visit the Treasures Gallery. And now we travel half an hour west and we visit Glasgow and the newly reopened Burrell Collection. This major collection has only had a tiny portion of the collection on display till now. But now we can see over 4,000 objects in new and innovative ways on display. And so let us join Rebecca Quinton as she introduces us to the Burrell Collection.
So Rebecca, could you tell us a little bit about the background to the Burrell Collection? Who were the donors, the collectors who collected what is now known as the Burrell Collection, and what is the breadth of it?
Yes. So the Burrell Collection was collected by Sir William Burrell and his wife Constance Lady Burrell. Burrell came from a shipping family in Glasgow. Unlike a lot of them, he wasn't building the ships, but he ran tramp shipping. He was leasing, selling ships. And he and actually other members of his family, but particularly him and his wife, were particularly interested in collecting art. He started collecting, we know, at least in the 1890s, possibly even before, and continued right the way through to his death in 1958. The collection he gave to the city, he and his wife, in 1944 consisted of 7,000 items. And over the following 14 years, he continued to add to it, so that we have now about 9,000 items. It's a very eclectic collection. It is driven by his interests and tastes. One of those was medieval art, so there's a lot of sculpture, stained glass and tapestries. But he was also interested in Islamic carpet, ceramics, and there's a fantastic, one of the largest collections of Chinese works from Neolithic bronzes through to later porcelains in the collection.
When we think of the Burrell Collection, we've always thought mainly about the tapestries. Were those the main part of the collection that you would exhibit before?
We've always exhibited quite a range of the collection before, but with the new displays, we can increase the number of objects. And where we have collections in storage, we're making the stores accessible. Things like the tapestries in particular, they're light sensitive, so we can never put all of them out at any one time. So we're trying to look at other ways, both digitally and in terms of physical access, to make the whole collection accessible, even if it isn't all in that traditional glass case museum display that visitors are used to.
I was fortunate enough in 2017, you were in New York working with the Met Museum around a wonderful book you've done around the tapestries. And then you exhibited, I believe it was the Wagner Carpet, which was, I think, the oldest Islamic carpet. It's absolutely stunning.
Yes, so the Wagner Garden Carpet is a fantastic piece of Islamic art. There are fragments and rugs that are slightly earlier, but this is a key example of a garden carpet that's from the 17th century. We were very fortunate. It's a large carpet. We've never been able to display it before for a long-term display. We can now in the new Burrell. But we had this opportunity when the building was closed to send key objects out on loan, and the Wagner Garden went to North America, including the Metropolitan and other museums around the country.
It was wonderful to see. And that's when I began to hear so much more about the Burrell, as you began really pushing your capital campaign. It's tremendous what has been achieved. So what can we look for as the Burrell now reopens? What are the focuses in the next few months around the breadth of this huge collection?
Well, I suppose the main thing is, in fact, the building. We've had this building now for about 40 years, but it was having issues. The roof was leaking. It was terribly hot with the glass. So our visitors will have just a much more enjoyable experience. There are no buckets. We've got energy efficient glass, so you won't burn or get too cold in the building. The light is now much better. The new glass in the cases, as well as in the windows, isn't tinted, and together with the new wonderful LED lighting, you can see the objects in their full color. Previously, everything was slightly not quite right. It was looking like green, slightly red, depending on the tungsten bulbs. So the visitor experience has really driven us to do that. We have maintained some of the key spaces that visitors loved before, such as the North Gallery with its displays of sculpture from classical Greek and Roman right the way through to a fantastic set of Rodins. It's the largest collection of Rodins in a collection in the UK. We've then increased our gallery space by 30%. This has enabled us to bring out more items, more of our fantastic 19th century paintings, French Impressionists, Post-Impressionists.
So I hope in these coming months, we can join you for various discussions around various parts of the collection. That would be really fascinating.
And so we visited this week Edinburgh and Glasgow, and now we travel to Paisley, the largest town in Scotland. And they have a major regeneration project underway that centers around the Paisley Museum. The Paisley Museum will bring a focus to this city with a £50 million capital improvement project within a £200 million project that's underway for the town. And so let us meet Kirsty Devine, who will tell us more about this wonderful project that's underway. A few years from completion, but very exciting for us to start to get familiar with.
So Kirsty, you are the project director for Paisley Redesigned. It's a capital improvement project, which is $60 million, for over £42 million. But as we've been hearing from Alistair about the whole project, it's part of a £250 million regeneration of the area. But this is like the leading jewel in the crown. So could we begin by speaking about the history to the museum and where it comes from and where we are going.
Of course. Yeah, really happy to, and it's nice to talk to you this morning, this afternoon, different time zones.
All upside down.
All upside down. So yes, as you say, Paisley Museum Reimagined project is part of a wider cultural regeneration strategy, and it's the leading project in around £100 million worth of investment in the town centre. And that came out of, and Alistair may have mentioned this, the Untold Story, which was the strategy for regeneration. And that's really because we know that culture has that power to transform lives. It sort of defines who we are, and it helps us shape our communities. And the museum is located right in the centre of Paisley, on the High Street. And we were really, it has a really interesting history. So the museum is 150 years old. We just had the anniversary last year. It opened in 1871, but actually it was added to over the course of 150 years. So there was a number of architectural extensions between 1871 and 1974. So the actual museum itself comprises of 4 buildings. There's the main museum, there is the observatory, which is at the top of the hill. There is what we call Transit House, which is a small historic building linked to astrological time. And there are the Oakshaw properties. And those are the historic buildings, and they are what we would call in Scotland listed. So they're Grade A and Grade C listed buildings. So that comes with certain safeguarding and certain limitations in terms of what we can do architecturally. And yeah, as I say, it's over the 150 years, it's not been a strategic master planning. They were added to in a fairly ad hoc way as money became available. They also built up the hill, so just to add to the complications. And really by the time we get to the late 20th, early 21st century, the building's probably not fit for purpose for visitors in the 21st century. So we didn't have a cafe. Access around the building was really difficult. Visitors would get lost, would think they had completed all areas of the building. If you had any kinds of mobility issues, or if you were there with young children, it was quite difficult to move around because there weren't lifts or elevators to move around the building. So there was definitely work.
And also people's way of enjoying an exhibit have changed so much. And so this is going to give you, so the experience is going to be enhanced and brought forward.
Definitely.
In such a huge way. And the observatory is sort of quite a large part of this project, almost separate to the museum, isn't it?
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you're raising about the observatory separate. And I think previously visitors would have understood it in that way. It was quite a disjointed campus. And actually, I'm not sure that visitors always knew that we had an observatory, and it's the oldest public observatory in Scotland. So it's a real gem for us. But a big part of the project was to rethink or reimagine the museum to be one unified campus, so that when you came into the building, you knew that you can go into the museum, you can go to the observatory, you can use the gardens, and it's seen as one whole museum visit.
And feel like returning, because there's so much to see.
Yeah.
There's a large amount to enjoy and see.
Thank you for joining us this week. I hope you've enjoyed this programme as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. This grew out of the Scottish North American Community Conference last year, when we were joined by several museums telling us of the innovative ways and capital improvement projects that are underway with them. And we've wanted to catch up with them and share their news in this programme. If you'd like to go to scottishleadershipconference.com and click on the video tab, you can hear back those segments from our conference in 2021. And join us, we hope, for the Scottish North American Community Conference this year. It will be October 21st to 23rd. And the subject, how North American Scots express their Scottishness. And so until next time, thank you for joining us.